In a quiet suburban neighborhood where rows of identical houses lined the streets and manicured lawns stretched endlessly, there lived a man named Alex Carter. Alex wasn't like most people in his community. While others spent their weekends mowing lawns or hosting barbecues, Alex had a different kind of passion: gardening. He loved growing things, nurturing plants from tiny seeds into thriving crops that could feed not just himself, but also those around him. When Alex first moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago, he noticed something unusual behind his house. There was a small patch of land tucked away at the edge of the property line. It wasn't much to look at back then, overgrown with weeds, littered with trash, and completely ignored by everyone else. But Alex saw potential where no one else did. To him, it wasn't just an empty lot. It was an opportunity waiting to be seized. Determined to make use of the space, Alex rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Over several weeks, he cleared out the debris, pulled up stubborn roots, and tilled the soil until it was soft and ready for planting. Slowly but surely, the once neglected area transformed into a lush oasis. Rows of tomatoes, zucchini, cucumbers, and peppers sprouted under Alex's care. Bright yellow sunflowers swayed gently in the breeze, adding pops of color to the greenery. Herbs like basil, mint, and rosemary filled the air with their fragrant scents. The garden became more than just a hobby for Alex. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the noise of everyday life and connect with nature. As the months passed, Alex's little garden began to attract attention. Neighbors walking their dogs would pause to admire the vibrant plants, often commenting on how beautiful the space looked. Some even stopped to chat with Alex, asking questions about how he managed to grow such healthy produce. Alex didn't mind sharing tips and tricks. He was happy to inspire others to take an interest in gardening. Occasionally, he'd leave baskets of fresh vegetables on his neighbors' doorsteps as a gesture of goodwill. It made him feel good knowing that his hard work was benefiting more than just himself. But not everyone in the neighborhood shared Alex's enthusiasm. A few residents started whispering among themselves, wondering if Alex had any right to use that piece of land. After all, it wasn't technically part of his property. It belonged to the Homeowners Association, HOA, which oversaw the upkeep of shared spaces within the community. At first, these murmurs were harmless enough, nothing more than idle gossip. But as the garden grew larger and more noticeable, so did the complaints. One day, while Alex was watering his plants, he overheard snippets of conversation from passing neighbors. "Doesn't he know that's HOA property?" one woman asked, her friend. "What gives him the right to plant stuff there?" another chimed in. Alex tried not to let it bother him. He figured that once people saw how much value the garden added to the neighborhood, they'd come around. Still, the comments lingered in the back of his mind, planting seeds of doubt about whether his efforts would be appreciated in the long run. Despite the growing tension, Alex continued tending to his garden. He believed wholeheartedly in what he was doing and refused to let negativity dampen his spirit. Little did he know, however, that trouble was brewing just beyond the horizon. What started as harmless chatter would soon escalate into something far more serious, a confrontation that would test Alex's resolve and force him to fight for what he loved. The turning point came on a crisp autumn morning when Alex answered a knock at his door. Standing on the other side was Mr. Thompson, the president of the HOA board. Clutching a clipboard in one hand and wearing an expression that was equal parts smugness and irritation, Mr. Thompson wasted no time getting straight to the point. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," he said curtly. "I'm here regarding your use of the common area behind your home." Alex felt his stomach tighten. He already knew where this conversation was headed. Mr. Thompson went on to explain that several homeowners had filed complaints about Alex's garden. According to the HOA covenants, residents weren't allowed to alter or utilize communal spaces without prior approval. "We appreciate your efforts to beautify the area," Mr. Thompson added, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But rules are rules, I'm afraid." Alex listened quietly, trying to keep his emotions in check. When it was his turn to speak, he calmly argued that the land had been neglected for years before he stepped in. "Look at it now," he said, gesturing toward the flourishing garden. It's cleaner, healthier, and adds value to the neighborhood. Isn't that what we all want? Unfortunately, Mr. Thompson wasn't convinced. With a final nod, he handed Alex a formal letter demanding that he cease all gardening activities immediately. As Alex closed the door behind him, he couldn't shake the sinking feeling in his chest. His dream, the thing that brought him so much joy, was being taken away from him. And yet, deep down, Alex knew this wasn't the end. Something inside him refused to give up without a fight. For days afterward, Alex found himself replaying the encounter in his head. How could something so positive be seen as a problem? Why couldn't the HOA see the bigger picture? These questions swirled in his mind as he stared out at his garden, wondering what the future held. Whatever happened next, Alex vowed to protect what he had built, even if it meant going against the very people who governed his community. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire neighborhood. The days following Mr. Thompson's visit were some of the hardest for Alex. He tried to go about his routine as usual, tending to his garden early in the morning and spending time among the plants that had become so much a part of his life. But the weight of the HOA's letter loomed over him like a dark cloud. Every time he watered the tomatoes or checked on the ripening peppers, he couldn't help but think about how fleeting this moment might be. Would he really have to tear it all down? The thought made his chest tighten. Alex wasn't ready to give up just yet. He decided to take action. First, he reached out to a few neighbors who had shown interest in his garden before. "Do you think you could write a note or say something at the next HOA meeting?" he asked them. "Just to explain how much this space means, not just to me but to everyone." Some agreed while others hesitated, worried about rocking the boat with the HOA board. Still, Alex was grateful for the support he did receive. He collected handwritten notes from a handful of neighbors, each one praising the garden for its beauty, sustainability, and community spirit. Armed with these testimonials, Alex spent hours researching urban gardening and its benefits. He printed articles about how gardens improved air quality, reduced waste through composting, and even helped lower crime rates by fostering stronger communities. He also took photos of his own garden, close-ups of blooming flowers, rows of healthy vegetables, and kids grinning as they helped plant seeds. By the time he finished gathering his materials, Alex felt confident. Surely, if he presented his case clearly and respectfully, the HOA would see reason. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and Alex walked into the community center feeling a mix of nerves and determination. The room buzzed with chatter as residents trickled in, taking their seats around a long table. Mr. Thompson sat at the head of the table, shuffling papers and glancing at his watch. When Alex stood up to speak, the room fell silent. He began by thanking everyone for letting him share his perspective. Then, with steady hands, he laid out his argument. "This garden isn't just mine," Alex said, his voice calm but firm. "It belongs to all of us. It's cleaned up an area that was once filled with trash and weeds. It's brought neighbors together, and it's taught our kids the importance of growing food and caring for the environment." He passed around the stack of letters and photos, hoping anyone would understand. For a brief moment, Alex thought he saw a flicker of doubt cross Mr. Thompson's face. Maybe this would work. But then another board member chimed in, her tone dismissive. "While we appreciate your efforts, Mr. Carter, this is still a violation of the covenants. We can't make exceptions for one person without setting a precedent." Others nodded in agreement. One man even suggested turning the space into a parking lot instead. "More cars means more convenience for everyone," he said, earning murmurs of approval from a few attendees. Alex felt his heart sink. No matter how logical or heartfelt his arguments were, the board seemed determined to shut him down. When the meeting ended, Alex left the room feeling defeated. As he drove home, he replayed the conversation in his mind, searching for anything he could have done differently. Had he not explained himself well enough? Should he have been angrier, louder, more forceful? Or was this simply a battle he couldn't win? The answer came sooner and harsher than he expected. A week later, Alex returned home from work to find something unthinkable: a tall iron fence surrounding his beloved garden. It stretched across the entire perimeter, cutting off access completely. At the center of the fence stood a single gate, locked tight with a heavy padlock. A sign hung prominently on the gate reading, "Private property, no trespassing." Standing there, staring at the cold metal barrier, Alex felt a wave of emotions crash over him. Anger bubbled inside him first, hot and sharp. How dare they do this? This wasn't just any piece of land. It was something he'd poured his heart and soul into. Sadness followed quickly after. The vibrant colors of the garden now seemed muted, behind the stark gray bars of the fence. It was as if someone had taken away a part of him, but beneath the anger and sadness, another emotion simmered: determination. Alex refused to let this be the end. If the HOA wanted to play hardball, fine. He would find a way to fight back, but smarter this time. That night, sitting alone in his kitchen, Alex opened his laptop and started digging deeper. He needed answers, and he wouldn't stop until he found them. His search led him to the local property records office. After combing through documents and cross-referencing details, Alex stumbled upon something surprising. The fenced-off parcel didn't belong to the HOA after all. Instead, it was owned by a private investor, a man named Mr. Harold Jenkins, who lived hundreds of miles away and rarely visited the area. Even more shocking? The lease agreement between Jenkins and the HOA was set to expire in just a few months. Slow smiles spread across Alex's face as the pieces clicked into place. Here was his chance, not just to reclaim the garden, but to take control of the situation entirely. Without wasting another second, Alex drafted a polite email to Mr. Jenkins, introducing himself and explaining the circumstances. He attached photos of the garden, along with the testimonials from neighbors and research on its environmental benefits. In closing, he offered to purchase the property outright. To Alex's relief, Jenkins responded within days. The investor admitted he hadn't paid much attention to the leased land over the years and was intrigued by Alex's story. They exchanged several emails and phone calls, negotiating terms and discussing the future of the property. It wasn't easy. Alex had to dip into his savings and secure a modest loan, but eventually, they reached an agreement. Against all odds, Alex became the proud owner of the very land he'd nurtured for so long. News of the sale traveled fast. When the HOA caught wind of what had happened, panic rippled through the board. Their attempt to shut Alex down had backfired spectacularly. Not only did he now legally own the property, but he also held the only key to the gate they'd installed. For the first time in weeks, Alex allowed himself to smile. The tables had turned and he was finally in control. Still, Alex knew better than to gloat. Instead, he focused on what mattered most: restoring the garden and proving to the community that his vision was worth fighting for. With ownership secured, he wasted no time tearing down the oppressive iron fence. Piece by piece, he dismantled the barrier that had symbolized everything wrong with the HOA's approach. In its place, he built a charming wooden trellis adorned with climbing roses and ivy. The transformation was nothing short of magical. Word of Alex's victory spread quickly through the neighborhood. Neighbors who had once been indifferent, or even critical, now approached him with curiosity and admiration. Many expressed regret for not supporting him sooner. Inspired by his perseverance, some even volunteered to help replant the garden. Together, they worked side by side, sowing seeds and rebuilding what had been lost. What began as a personal project evolved into a true community effort. Kids learned how to grow carrots and radishes, while adults discovered the joys of composting and sustainable living. Even those who had initially opposed the garden warmed up to the idea, admitting that it brought beauty and unity to the area. The once divided neighborhood found common ground in the soil beneath their feet. As for the HOA, their protests fell on deaf ears. Embarrassed by their short-sightedness, they quietly stopped interfering. Meanwhile, Alex stood proudly amidst the vibrant greenery, knowing he'd fought for something greater than himself. And every time someone asked about the old iron gate, Alex simply smiled and said, It's just decoration now. The iron fence loomed like a fortress around Alex's once thriving garden. It was a cruel sight, cold and unyielding, separating him from the very thing he had poured his heart into building. Every time Alex looked at it, he felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. How could something so beautiful be reduced to this, trapped behind bars as if it were some kind of criminal act? The sign on the gate, with its bold letters declaring, "Private property, no trespassing," mocked him silently. But beneath the anger and sadness, Alex's determination burned brighter than ever. He knew that giving up wasn't an option. This garden wasn't just about growing vegetables, it represented resilience, creativity, and community. If the HOA wanted to play games, fine. Alex would find a way to outsmart them, but not by fighting fire with fire. Instead, he decided to take a step back, think strategically, and dig deeper into the situation. After all, sometimes the best way to win a battle is to uncover truths no one else sees. That night, after another long day spent staring at the fence, Alex sat down at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened his laptop. He started searching for information about the land itself. Who owned it? Was it truly part of the HOA's jurisdiction, or was there more to the story? His fingers flew across the keyboard as he typed keywords into search engines. Property records, HOA, common areas, land ownership. Hours passed, but finally, he stumbled upon something intriguing: a website for local property records. With newfound hope, Alex began navigating through the site. At first, the process felt overwhelming. There were countless documents, maps, and legal jargon to sift through. But Alex was patient. He zoomed in on satellite images of the neighborhood, tracing the boundaries of properties until he found the exact plot where his garden stood. Then, clicking through layers of data, he discovered something shocking. The fenced-off parcel didn't belong to the HOA after all. Instead, it was owned by a private investor named Harold Jenkins. This revelation hit Alex like a bolt of lightning. If the land wasn't technically the HOA's, then their decision to install the fence and their authority to dictate what happened there was questionable at best. Excited but cautious, Alex dug further. He learned that Jenkins lived hundreds of miles away in a bustling city and rarely visited the suburban area. More importantly, the lease agreement between Jenkins and the HOA was set to expire in just a few months. This meant the HOA's claim over the land was temporary and shaky. Alex couldn't believe his luck. For weeks, he'd felt powerless against the HOA's rigid rules and domineering attitude. Now, armed with this new knowledge, he saw a glimmer of opportunity. If he could buy the land outright, he'd gain full control of the garden and render the HOA's actions meaningless. Of course, purchasing real estate wasn't a simple task. It required money, negotiation, and trust. But Alex wasn't about to let fear stop him. He had come too far to turn back now. The next morning, Alex composed a carefully worded email to Mr. Jenkins. He introduced himself as a neighbor who had been using the land for gardening purposes and explained how much the space meant to him and the community. He included photos of the thriving garden before the fence went up, rows of vibrant vegetables, blooming flowers, and smiling children helping to plant seeds. He also attached testimonials from neighbors praising the positive impact the garden had on the neighborhood. Finally, he made his pitch. "I'd like to purchase the property outright and continue maintaining it as a green space for everyone to enjoy." Hitting send felt like taking a leap of faith. Alex knew Jenkins might ignore him or reject the offer outright, but deep down, he believed that honesty and passion could make a difference. Days ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. Just when Alex started to worry that his message had fallen into a black hole, he received a reply. Jenkins wrote back, expressing curiosity about the situation. Though polite, his tone was cautious. He admitted he hadn't paid much attention to the leased land over the years and asked for more details about Alex's plans. Encouraged by the response, Alex jumped at the chance to elaborate. Over the next few days, they exchanged several emails and even spoke on the phone. Jenkins listened intently as Alex described his vision for the garden, not just as a personal project but as a resource for the entire community. He talked about teaching kids the importance of sustainability, reducing food waste, and creating a sense of connection among neighbors. Slowly but surely, Jenkins warmed up to the idea. He admired Alex's dedication and recognized the value of preserving such a unique space. Of course, negotiations weren't without challenges. Money was a sticking point. While Alex had savings set aside, buying the land outright required dipping into funds he'd earmarked for other goals. He also needed to secure a modest loan to cover the rest of the cost. Negotiating terms took time, patience, and compromise. Jenkins, though supportive, still wanted to ensure he got a fair deal. But Alex refused to let setbacks deter him. He reminded himself why he was doing this, not for profit but for principle. Finally, after weeks of back-and-forth discussions, they reached an agreement. Alex would officially become the owner of the parcel, gaining full rights to the land. When the paperwork was signed and sealed, Alex felt a rush of emotions, relief, pride, and a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to celebrate. Against all odds, he had turned the tide in his favor, but owning the land was only half the battle. Now came the hard part, reclaiming the garden and proving to the community and the HOA that his vision was worth fighting for. Alex wasted no time getting to work. With the help of a few trusted friends, he began dismantling the iron fence piece by piece. The metal clangs echoed through the neighborhood, drawing curious onlookers. Some cheered him on while others watched silently, unsure of what to make of the spectacle. As the fence came down, Alex replaced it with something entirely different. A charming wooden trellis adorned with climbing roses and ivy. Where the old barrier had been harsh and unwelcoming, the new structure radiated warmth and life. It was a symbolic gesture, signaling not just the rebirth of the garden but also a fresh start for the community. Neighbors who had once dismissed Alex's efforts now approached him with questions and offers to help. Inspired by his perseverance, many volunteered to replant the garden alongside him. What followed was nothing short of miraculous. Families gathered on weekends to sow seeds, pull weeds, and build raised beds. Kids laughed as they learned how to grow carrots and radishes, while adults marveled at the simplicity of composting kitchen scraps. Even those who had initially opposed the garden softened their stance, admitting that it brought beauty and unity to the area. The once divided neighborhood found common ground in the soil beneath their feet. Meanwhile, the HOA scrambled to save face. Board members whispered nervously about what to do next, but their power play had clearly failed. They had underestimated Alex's determination and his ability to rally support. Embarrassed by their short-sightedness, they quietly backed off, leaving Alex in the garden alone. It was a silent admission of defeat, though no one dared say it aloud. Standing amidst the vibrant greenery, Alex couldn't help but smile. The journey had been long and difficult, but every challenge had led him here, to a place where dreams could flourish, where people could come together, and where a small patch of earth could inspire big changes. And whenever someone asked about the old iron gate, Alex simply grinned and said, "It's just decoration now." With the iron fence dismantled and the wooden trellis standing tall, Alex finally felt a sense of victory. But this wasn't just about reclaiming his garden. It was about proving that perseverance could overcome even the toughest obstacles. Now that he legally owned the land, there was no one to stop him from bringing his vision to life. Yet as much as Alex wanted to celebrate, he knew the real work was just beginning. The garden may have been saved, but it needed more than just plants to thrive. It needed people, neighbors, friends, and strangers alike to come together and make it a true community space. The first step was repairing the damage caused by the HOA's actions. Months of neglect had taken their toll on the once thriving crops. Some of the vegetables were overgrown or spoiled, while others had dried up under the unforgiving sun. Weeds had crept in where flowers and herbs used to bloom, choking out what little remained. It was heartbreaking to see, but Alex refused to let despair take hold. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and got to work, determined to restore the garden to its former glory. And then some. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about the garden's revival. Neighbors who had previously stayed silent, or even criticized Alex, began showing up at his doorstep offering apologies and asking how they could help. At first, Alex was cautious. He didn't want to appear bitter or resentful, nor did he want to turn anyone away. After all, rebuilding the garden wasn't just his responsibility anymore. It belonged to everyone now. So, with a warm smile, he welcomed them into the fold. On the first official garden rebuilding day, a small group gathered behind Alex's house. Armed with shovels, gloves, and wheelbarrows, they set to work clearing out the remnants of the old garden. Kids ran around collecting stray sticks and leaves, while adults worked side by side pulling weeds and tilling the soil. Someone brought a portable speaker, filling the air with upbeat music that made the hard labor feel lighter. Laughter echoed across the yard as neighbors reconnected over shared memories of the garden's heyday. As the day wore on, Alex noticed something remarkable happening. People weren't just working, they were bonding. Strangers introduced themselves, swapping stories about their families, jobs, and hobbies. Longtime residents reminisced about how the neighborhood used to be before modern conveniences turned front porches into screens and sidewalks into empty spaces. For many, this was the first time they'd interacted with their neighbors in years. And it was all thanks to the garden. But Alex didn't stop there. He knew that simply replanting the same vegetables wouldn't be enough to sustain interest in the long run. To truly transform the space into a hub of activity, he needed to think bigger. That's when inspiration struck. Why not expand the garden beyond its original boundaries? With Harold Jenkins' blessing, Alex leased a small portion of the adjacent land to create additional features. A pollinator garden filled with native wildflowers would attract bees and butterflies, supporting local ecosystems. Raised beds designed for accessibility would allow elderly residents and those with mobility issues to participate without strain. There would even be a shaded seating area where people could relax, read books, or enjoy picnics among the greenery. To fund these improvements, Alex organized a series of fundraisers. Bake sales, garage sales, and plant swaps became regular weekend events, drawing crowds from nearby neighborhoods. Local businesses donated supplies, and volunteers pitched in however they could. One family offered to build benches using reclaimed wood, while another installed a rainwater collection system to conserve resources. Slowly but surely, the garden grew, not just in size but in spirit. Of course, not everything went smoothly. Some neighbors still harbored resentment toward Alex for defying the HOA, accusing him of causing unnecessary drama. Others worried that expanding the garden might disrupt the neighborhood's aesthetic or attract pests. Alex listened patiently to their concerns, addressing each one with facts and empathy. He invited skeptics to visit the garden and see for themselves how clean, organized, and beneficial it was. Over time, even the harshest critics softened their stance, won over by the tangible results of Alex's efforts. One particularly memorable moment came during a community planting session. A young boy named Ethan, who rarely spoke to anyone outside his immediate family, approached Alex holding a tiny pot of marigolds. "Can I plant this here?" he asked shyly. Alex knelt down to meet him at eye level and nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, where do you want to put it?" Together they found the perfect spot near the entrance, marking it with a small sign that read, "Ethan's Marigolds." As Ethan stood back to admire his handiwork, his face lit up with pride. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to both of them. As weeks turned into months, the garden flourished in ways Alex never imagined. Rows of tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers stretched toward the sky, their vibrant colors a testament to the care and effort poured into them. Fragrant herbs like basil, thyme, and rosemary lined the paths, releasing their scents with every passing breeze. Sunflowers towered overhead, casting golden shadows on the ground below. Even the pollinator garden buzzed with life, attracting bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds that danced between the blossoms. Yet the most significant change wasn't visible, it was felt. The garden had become more than just a place to grow food. It was a symbol of unity, resilience, and hope. Neighbors who had once lived parallel lives now shared meals made from the garden's produce. Kids learned valuable lessons about sustainability and teamwork, while adults rediscovered the joys of slowing down and connecting with nature. Friendships formed, conflicts resolved, and a sense of belonging took root. Even the HOA couldn't ignore the transformation. Though they had initially dismissed Alex's efforts as reckless and unnecessary, they now found themselves on the defensive. Complaints dwindled as more residents praised the garden for its positive impact. Board members, embarrassed by their earlier missteps, avoided bringing up the topic altogether. In fact, during one meeting, a brave homeowner stood up and suggested dedicating part of the annual budget to maintaining communal green spaces. The motion passed unanimously, signaling a shift in priorities within the community. For Alex, the ultimate vindication came when Mr. Thompson, the very man who had delivered the ultimatum months ago, showed up at the garden one afternoon, clutching a potted lavender plant. He hesitated at the gate before approaching Alex. I wanted to say thank you," he muttered awkwardly. "This place is incredible. You've done something amazing here." Alex smiled, extending a hand. "Thanks for stopping by. There's always room for more helpers if you're interested." Mr. Thompson chuckled nervously but nodded. "Maybe next weekend." It was a small moment, yet deeply meaningful. It proved that even the staunchest opponents could be swayed by persistence and goodwill. More importantly, it showed that change wasn't just possible, it was inevitable when people worked together toward a common goal. Looking back on everything he'd been through, Alex realized that buying the property hadn't been the hardest part. The real challenge lay in earning trust, fostering collaboration, and inspiring others to believe in something greater than themselves. And though the journey had been long and difficult, every obstacle had led him to this point, a thriving garden surrounded by a thriving community. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the rows of vegetables and flowers, Alex leaned against the trellis and took a deep breath. The air smelled of earth, growth, and possibility. Somewhere nearby, children laughed as they chased fireflies, their voices blending with the hum of crickets and rustling leaves. It was a sound Alex hoped would never fade, a reminder that sometimes bending the rules isn't just necessary, it's transformative. And whenever someone asked about the old iron gate, Alex simply grinned and said, "It's just decoration now." The garden had become more than just a patch of land. It was a living, breathing testament to what could be achieved when determination met community spirit. Alex stood amidst the vibrant rows of vegetables and flowers, watching as neighbors laughed, worked, and connected in ways he'd never imagined possible. What started as a personal project had blossomed into something far greater. A shared space where people came together to grow not only food, but also friendships, trust, and hope. Every weekend, the garden buzzed with activity. Families gathered to plant seeds, pull weeds, and harvest ripe produce. Kids ran barefoot through the pathways, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves and chirping birds. Teenagers who once spent hours glued to screens now volunteered to build trellises or paint signs for different sections of the garden. Even elderly neighbors found joy in tending to raised beds designed specifically for accessibility, their wrinkled hands gently patting soil around tender seedlings. The garden had become a sanctuary, a place where everyone, regardless of age or background, felt welcome. One of the most heartwarming aspects of the transformation was how it brought out the best in people. Neighbors who had lived side by side for years without so much as a wave began sharing meals made from the garden's bounty. Someone would bake zucchini bread using freshly picked squash, while another brought homemade salsa crafted from tomatoes and peppers. These impromptu potlucks often spilled over into late evenings, with stories exchanged under strings of fairy lights strung between trees. Bonds formed that hadn't existed before, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could bridge divides. Alex took pride in seeing the garden evolve beyond its original purpose. The pollinator section, filled with native wildflowers, attracted bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds, creating an ecosystem teeming with life. Children loved watching monarch caterpillars transform into chrysalises and then emerge as brilliant orange butterflies. Adults marveled at the sight of honeybees flitting from flower to flower, knowing they played a vital role in sustaining the planet. The shaded seating area became a favorite spot for book clubs, morning coffee rituals, and quiet reflection. It was here that Alex often sat, sipping tea and observing the harmony unfolding around him. But perhaps the greatest triumph was the shift in perspective within the neighborhood, and even the HOA itself. At first, skepticism lingered among some residents who still questioned whether the garden truly belonged in a suburban setting. Yet, as time went on, resistance melted away. Those who had initially dismissed Alex's efforts as impractical or disruptive couldn't deny the tangible benefits the garden brought. Crime rates in the area dropped slightly, likely due to increased foot traffic and neighborly vigilance. Property values rose subtly as the lush greenery replaced unsightly patches of weeds and trash. Even complaints about noise or aesthetics vanished entirely, replaced by praise for the beauty and functionality of the space. The HOA board, once adamant about shutting down the garden, found themselves in an awkward position. Their earlier attempts to assert control now seemed petty and short-sighted. Board meetings grew quieter as members avoided revisiting the topic altogether. Instead, they focused on other projects, like organizing annual block parties and improving park facilities. During one such meeting, a bold homeowner proposed allocating funds to support similar green initiatives throughout the community. To everyone's surprise, the motion passed unanimously. For the first time, the HOA appeared to embrace, not resist, change. Even Mr. Thompson, the man who had delivered the ultimatum months ago, underwent a remarkable transformation. After his initial visit to the garden, he returned regularly, rolling up his sleeves to help with tasks, big and small. Whether it was mulching pathways or installing irrigation systems, he threw himself into the work with surprising enthusiasm. His interactions with Alex softened too. The two men developed an unlikely friendship, bonding over their shared love of gardening and problem-solving. One evening, as they sat together beneath the trellis enjoying cold lemonade, Mr. Thompson admitted, "I was wrong about you, Alex. You've done something extraordinary here." Alex smiled, raising his glass in a mock toast. "We all did this together," he replied. "It's not just my garden anymore. It's ours." As word of the garden's success spread, it caught the attention of local media outlets. Reporters visited to document the story, capturing photos of smiling volunteers and bountiful harvests. Articles appeared in newspapers and online blogs, highlighting the garden as a model for sustainable urban living. Soon, representatives from nearby neighborhoods reached out, asking for advice on starting their own community gardens. Alex welcomed them warmly, offering tours and sharing tips on everything from soil preparation to fundraising strategies. He even hosted workshops, teaching attendees how to compost, preserve food, and attract pollinators. The garden became a beacon of inspiration, proving that grassroots efforts could spark meaningful change. Despite the accolades, Alex remained humble. He knew the garden's success wasn't solely his achievement. It belonged to everyone who had contributed, no matter how small their role. From the child planting a single marigold to the retiree designing intricate trellises, each person had left their mark. And though Alex cherished the recognition, he valued the connections forged along the way far more than any headlines or awards. On crisp autumn mornings, as golden sunlight filtered through the trellis and dew clung to spiderwebs stretched between plants, Alex reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the day he first cleared the overgrown lot, the frustration of dealing with the HOA, and the audacity of buying the property outright. Each challenge had tested his resolve, pushing him to dig deeper, not just into the soil but into his own beliefs and values. Through it all, he had learned that perseverance wasn't about bulldozing obstacles. It was about finding creative solutions, building bridges, and inspiring others to join the cause. The old iron gate, which had once symbolized oppression and division, now served as a reminder of resilience and triumph. Alex kept it standing, not as a barrier, but as a testament to how far they'd come. Painted white and adorned with climbing roses, It blended seamlessly with the wooden trellis, welcoming visitors with open arms. Whenever someone asked why he hadn't removed it entirely, Alex simply grinned and said, "It's part of the story." And what a story it was. One of courage, creativity, and community. A tale of turning adversity into opportunity, of transforming barren ground into fertile soil, and of uniting strangers into friends. The garden wasn't just a place to grow vegetables. It was a place to grow dreams, relationships, and hope for a brighter future. As the seasons changed and the garden continued to thrive, Alex knew it would always hold a special place in his heart. It represented not only what he had built, but also what he had learned. That sometimes breaking rules isn't rebellion, it's revolution. And in this quiet suburban neighborhood, a revolution had taken root, spreading its branches wide and reaching toward the sky.